So it's wonderful. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you to Valley for putting these things together. I've done some presentations for them in the past. They were live, of course, prior to 2.5 years ago, but this is wonderful. Being on Zoom, everyone can be relaxed and do their thing while we're talking for a little while. We're going to discuss dads connecting with daughters tonight. Really important topic. I'm a dad. I was just telling Danielle, in fact, I was probably over telling Danielle. I was kind of going on and on a little bit about it. And my daughter's 27. She lives in Montclair and was recently married. I'm going to throw a few tidbits in there about things that I've done in the past that were helpful, and things in hindsight that I think was good decisions I made. And then maybe I'll even give you something I didn't do so well. We'll see how that goes. Danielle's going to move our screen along. What's the right word for that? Slide to move the slides along?
Next. We can say next.
Next. Okay, perfect. I broke the slides up into ages. So I wanted to talk about the whole continuum from birth to college. And I didn't know exactly how to do that. So I just did it the simplest way I thought. I broke it up into ages. Not every age group is going to be perfectly delineated. Like the first slide is 0 to 3. 0 to 1 is a little different than 2 to 3, but we'll talk about that. Some chats. Will everything just go into the Q&A, or can there be a chat too, Danielle?
It can be both.
Okay.
So yeah, you guys can throw questions in the Q&A or the chat too.
Okay, so a chat, something that would be helpful on the chat is if, as I'm going through each slide, if you have anything that's worked well for you, just put it real short in the chat and I'll read it out. I'll read it to everybody, okay? So 0 to 3 years old. These are newborns, infants, babies, toddlers. I hope I got that order correct. And 0 to 1, 0 to 2 is a little bit different than 2 to 3. When kids are first born, you really want to pay special attention to affection, to touch, to your affect, to getting really hands-on and getting in there with them, to letting them see your face, to talking closely. It doesn't really matter what you're saying, to talk a little bit, talk more than a little bit, to talk a lot throughout the day and evening with your newborn, as early as days and weeks and months old. Research shows the time and affection that kids receive at very early ages can have a big impact on them later in life. So talk to your baby, get right in there. One of the things I used to do was, my daughter would be in that carry seat, I guess they call it, and I'd move her around the house and that before she could walk. And instead of putting her on the coffee table and me on the couch, I would put her on the kitchen table, and then I'd be at the kitchen table, so she'd be right in front of me. So our faces would be close together. Not all the time, of course, but some of the time. And that was really helpful. Spend time, focus on your affect with young children, your daughter. This really goes for boys and girls, but we're talking about daughters. And these things are important for your wife or partner too. So a lot of things we're going to talk about are dads connecting with daughters, but a lot of things apply to boys and girls. Don't be afraid to get right in there. As they hit 2, as they hit 3, as they're walking, the time and the talking still applies, but you want to shift a little bit for playtime. And playtime can be anything. Just get on the rug, just get on the floor, toys, stuffed animals, things like that. I used to like to keep backup plans for play. So we would have play plan number 1, which would be on the floor with toys, really getting in there, spending time together. Then I would have like a backup plan where we would do something a little bit more relaxed on the couch. And then I would have plan C when things got really long or really old, and we would watch a video or something, together. I can't remember all those shows that were on when my daughter was young. But to sum up the slide, and if anybody wants to throw a chat out there for something that's been helpful for them here, please go ahead. But to sum up this slide, connect through touch. Don't be afraid to get in there. Lots of one-on-one time. We're going to talk a little bit about special time, just daughter and dads, but this time's really for everybody in the family. Even siblings can get in on these helpful pieces. Okay, anything else here I want to go over? Okay. All right, Danielle, how about the next slide, please? All right, so obviously they become 4 to 8. And this slide is similar to the last one, where the 4 and 5-year-olds are a little bit different than the 7 and 8-year-olds. And I don't really have the points exactly in order, so we'll kind of go through them as I see the ages. So when they hit 4, you kind of want to shift from just play, although play is always important, and just affect and just touch, to slightly older things like reading with them, reading to them. I used to let, that's not right. I used to encourage my daughter to help me around the house with things. And of course, part of the reason was because I had things I needed to get done. But the other piece was we enjoyed the time together. And even if it was something simple, I would encourage her. I would talk about what we're doing. We're going to clean the kitchen table up there, and we would do it together. And those things are really great. It also helps with, and we'll touch about this later. It also helps with mastery. So you're teaching your kids how to kind of get involved, make goals, and get things done with you. So with daughters, dads really want to continue to set some time aside with their daughter. All family time is important, and if your wife is there, it's fine. But special time, just you and your daughter, is really great. One of the things that I did, frankly, I still do it, is we would work on a goal together. Not a short goal, not a simple goal, but a long-term goal. All right, so you guys out there, think about if you have a partner on your fantasy football team. All right, so I'm sure you have a fantasy football team, you have a partner, you're talking with them a lot in the summer, you're talking before draft, you're talking multiple times, you're making plans, you're doing it together, you're decision making, big day on draft day, you're having a great time, you talk twice a week after that. So there's these ongoing conversations, these ongoing goals, these ongoing decision makings. And as they hit 7 and 8, you can let them make more of the decisions. It could be setting up a train set in the basement. It shouldn't be anything expensive. It could be practicing once a week to get good at a sport, but something more tangible and hands-on were things I would always do. I would focus on things around the house. Like I'd say, we're going to paint the railing the next 4 or 5 Sundays. Now, she didn't know that was boring. She thought it was exciting to do that with me. We would talk about what color. I'd help her or let her or aid her in making decisions, what end we're going to start on. And it became this way of just connecting and staying together. It could be visiting a grandparent every Sunday. That's not quite as much a goal, but that's important too. Okay. So you want to keep the conversations going at this age, especially 4 and 5. 7 and 8, there might be some friend influence and maybe some cousins and things like that, but you really want to keep the conversations going. Have a family day. So this is a great time for family day. They're not too old to say no yet. Saturday afternoons, I'm sure lots of people do things Saturday afternoons. We used to always do something on Saturday afternoon. I always tried to make it inexpensive because I wanted it to be something sustainable. And I hope this is helpful, giving you some ideas of things I did. One of the things we did probably from about maybe in the middle of this age, maybe 6 or 7, all the way through to middle high school, is we would go to church on Saturdays at 5 o'clock. So we enjoyed it. My wife liked it. It was structured. We knew we were going to be together. Everyone could count on it. It was free. We would go out for an inexpensive dinner afterwards. And we had this chunk of time that we rarely missed. every Saturday, 4:30 to 7:30. And it really had a stabilizing effect on the family. So something like that. When they hit 7 or 8, you can even ask them if they have something that they'd like to do together. They might pick something you don't want to do. So maybe some ideas from yourself would be better. That's what I always did. I always kind of came up with the ideas myself. All right, let's see. There's one question. Should I click on it, Danielle?
Yes, it's a good
All right.
one.
All right. So Steven said, I found being silly without being worrying about anything that was going on is a great connection. Fantastic. So that's exactly the kinds of things you want to do. And Steve, thanks. That's exactly the kinds of things I'm looking for to help out. So get down on the carpet, get silly. The goal could be something silly. I guess I always focused on more productive things because I always had things I had to get done, but certainly you don't have to do that. And don't forget Family Day. Okay, Danielle, let's go to 9 to 12, if I remember correctly.
I have to say one thing, Bart.
Sure,
You
please.
mentioned doing things with your daughter that were like tasks to do around the house. And I remember doing that with my dad all the time. He had to paint a wall. I did it with him. And like you said, I thought it was fun. Now that I'm an adult, he was totally tricking me to do work for him.
Right.
However, I thought it was super fun. And he taught me how to use a hammer. He taught me how to do that. And I'm 34 now, and I remember that as a connection me and my dad had. So that's pretty cool.
So it was the connection, it was the time, but it was teaching him mastery too. He was teaching you that you can learn how to do this too.
Yep.
And I'm going to show you a couple times, and you know what? You'll know how to do it. And that goes real far, and it really helps out with the resiliency that we're going to talk about briefly at the end. Okay, so things change here at age 9 to 12. And again, 9 and 12, 9 and 10 are different than 11 and 12. We'll try to break them out a little bit. And I guess my main theme for this slide is I tried to say yes as often as I could. And that put kids in a spot where they felt that their thinking was valuable. If they had an idea, it could be viewed as important as my idea. And again, I used to create scenarios where I could say yes because I didn't care what she chose. So I would do things like, say, why don't you go in the fridge tonight and choose what we're having for dinner? And I didn't mind what she chose because I could have prepared anything that was in the fridge at that night. I would give her choices like, what would you like to watch on TV tonight? When she would say, can I stay up later on Saturday night? I'd say yes, because it was Saturday night. And I wouldn't hem and haw about it. It's really important to do the best you can to let kids have this opportunity to take those tiny little steps into adulthood. I'm trying to think as we're talking about other things that you can pre-plan to say yes to. If anyone has one, send them to us, please. So at 9 and 10, they're still young. You still want to go with the common themes that we've been talking about. Time, talking, reading, doing things together, just dad and a daughter. It may be a time that you even want to go more towards just spending some time with your daughter. Of course, you don't have to exclude anybody, but if there's things that she likes, you could make a special daughter and dad time. I was kind of lucky in that, although I didn't always feel lucky at the time. In hindsight, I was kind of lucky. My wife worked every other weekend. So every Saturday and Sunday, it was just my daughter and I. And we had the whole day together, 4 days a week. And we would spend, the whole day together at this age. Now, at 11 and 12, maybe not so much. She made friends in the neighborhood. And those were important times for us. So let's move to 11 and 12 as I'm talking about friends. This is when, they may have friends at any time and friends at school and things like that. But this is when friends want to start coming over. Especially now with cell phones, friends are going to text. Maybe it's a little young for a cell phone, but kids are going to want to come over. And you want to set the stage, set a scenario for being a good host. And you can kind of incorporate that even into a goal. Let's put some couches in the basement. Let's clean up the rec room. We'll make a space for you and your friends, and it can kind of be your semi-permanent space. It's really important for kids to have that time and have that experience, because they learn a lot of things in life through the interactions that they have with their friends, making friends, learning how to be social, learning how to say yes, learning how to say no, learning how to set limits. Sorry, without my glasses, sometimes I can't see too much. So the friend piece is really important, and you certainly want to be that house that kids want to come over to. As they hit 11 and 12, learning becomes more important. You're going to move slightly away from the emotional bond to helping with the intellectual bond. So that means reading, helping with homework, asking your daughter if there's something she wants to learn. It could be a sport. It could be something more book related. There was a bookstore we used to go to once every 3 or 4 weeks, and back then it was inexpensive. And I would let her buy a book each time we went, and it was an outing, incorporated a bunch of things we were talking about. And I would ask her about it and things like that. So I had this long-term goal. All right, what else do I want to go over on this slide? The last point sort of moves us into the 12 and 13-year-old part. It starts to become time that kids, and they almost always do this throughout their life, especially daughters, ask dad important things, but it becomes a time where she's not going to just ask your opinion because you know everything. She's going to start needing her thoughts and opinions validated. So of course you can listen a little bit more. You can ask her what she thinks. This is also a good spot to say, so what do you think we should do? Which part of the wall do you think we should start painting? Of course, knowing it doesn't matter. But when she masters that and feels and sees that, gee, you thought her idea was a good one, really, really important for confidence and really important for building resilience. Okay, so the next slide's the big one, Danielle. As you can see, this one has a lot of writing on it. I don't know how we're going to get through this whole slide. So they're now a teenager. And again, 13, 14, 15, even 16, 13 to 16 is very different than 17 and 18. Our experience, my experience working with kids and working in mental health for 35 years, is the maturity level, not with everybody, but the maturity level usually hits about age 16. It can actually go down from 13 to 16, and then it invariably goes up from 17 and 18. So you folks out there with 12 and 13-year-olds, sorry, I don't want to scare anybody, but they're also very fun times, and there's a lot of great opportunities. And 17 and 18 will come around. So this is when you have to change a little bit. You have to move away, like we said, from emotional connection, which can still continue, but they're not going to continue like they did before. And you have to move to more listening. I have that on there somewhere. You have to move to more listening. You have to move to really valuing and planning the time you have together. There's going to be less of it. 13, maybe not. 14, maybe a little bit. 15, 16, they're going to want to hang out with their friends. And that's why you did the planning on the slide before. So friends can come over your house and your daughter can feel like she has a safe, appropriate place to invite kids. So the first point, I always thought dinner was a great spot to be together. We had dinner every night at 5:30, even through high school, right up until the time my daughter left for college, and even when she was home from college, which is more often than you think, by the way. We would have dinner together. Wasn't long, wasn't a big deal. I never brought up, I shouldn't say that. I rarely brought up tough conversations. If something needed to be brought up, of course, I would bring it up. Didn't ask her if she finished all her homework at this time. Didn't ask her what she was doing on Saturday. We just sat together and we had dinner. I'm going to digress for a moment, Danielle, and I didn't think of saying this, but one of the things that my wife did, and I wasn't home at this time, but after school from around 12 to 16 would be tough. Yeah, it was a long day. They'd have homework, and my daughter would often get home and not want to answer questions about her homework. So we had a moratorium on homework discussion from 3 to 4 every day for years. My daughter wasn't allowed to talk about it. My wife wasn't allowed to ask about it. And then invariably she would start it and doing it. And at 4 o'clock, the gloves were off and you were allowed to talk about homework at that point. Okay, let's get back to the screen. Dad, you want to continue to schedule some time with your daughter? And I don't mean, on your Outlook, but I mean, let's do something Saturday afternoon or plan something. Ask her if there's things she wants to do. Sports come into play a lot here. We used to go to Jackal baseball games on Saturdays and Princeton football game on Sundays. And it was great. It was something to do, and my daughter enjoyed it. Sometimes she would bring a friend and things like that. All right, let's get to the toughest part of the slide. So age, I don't know, it could be any age in here, but it's usually not 18. It's usually 13, 14, 15. There's going to be some rebelliousness. It's going to happen. Your daughter's gonna stomp up the stairs and slam the door. If she hasn't yet, she's going to. Super, super important to not overreact. In fact, I try to react minimally, unless you absolutely have to, of course. But to just the general, simple, I can't believe I have to be home by 10 o'clock, storming up the stairs, I never reacted. Very important for your teenage daughters, and this, goes for sons too, but I think more for daughters. Very important for them to see you model patience, to model understanding, for them to know that it's not easy for them, and instead of you making it harder, you're helping them make it easier. Don't take it personally. Lots of changes, lots of hormones, lots of pressure, all kinds of social media, which we'll talk about, which I don't know as much about as perhaps I should. Don't react. Don't take it personally. So I don't know. I wrote to drop dead there, Danielle. That might be a little strong, but let's change that to just when they storm upstairs, okay? So when your teen storms upstairs, don't follow them upstairs. Don't tell them if they slam that door again, they're going to pay for it. Just stay downstairs, keep the ball game on. Invariably, they'll come back downstairs and they'll say, really, I can't stay out till 10:30. And just say, no, 10 o'clock. Maybe a year or two, you can stay out till 10:30. Take a deep breath, stand your ground. This helps teach values. This helps model. It reduces the chaos. It reduces fights. If you start getting into a battle over just them acting out slightly, it's a battle that they don't understand. Nobody's going to win, and you're not modeling the important things that you need to. Now, I know it's not easy. Of course, if it goes on frequently, you have to set some limits. But each time you react in a gentle, compassionate, calm way, it will help the next rebellious moment be less intense. Okay, so these are still times that you have to worry about schoolwork. That's a little tough because you don't want to overdo it, like I was saying, but certainly you can't ignore it. Health, nutrition, schoolwork, those things remain important at this age. 17 and 18 usually changes a little bit. I didn't write too much 17 and 18-year-old things on here, but that changes a little bit. It's more adultish. There's driving. There could be alcohol, and we'll talk about those things a little bit in the next 2 slides. All right, any feedback on anything that has worked for anybody, please? Send it in like Steven did and help me out a little bit. Okay, Danielle, we can go to the next slide. So I am not a social media expert. I don't really know a whole lot about it in detail, but we're going to use the common sense themes about it. Set the tone, talk about it early. By 18, 19, they're doing the social media themselves, they're texting themselves. But at 12, 13, 14, is 12 too early, Danielle? Do kids have cell phones at 12, or is it more 13, 14?
I hope not. I hope that's too early, but my daughter's only 4 and
All right, well, that's too
I
early
don't know.
for her.
Right? I think.
Okay, so I'm thinking by 12, kids have cell phones, and you want to set the tone for social media. Be calm, set some parameters. You don't have to set limits. I used to set parameters. So no cell phone at 8 o'clock, 8:30 when we're watching a Disney show before we go to bed. No cell phone at dinner time. No cell phone on Sunday mornings. No cell phone when you're visiting your grandparents. But you also don't want to set a lot of limits around it. You do want them to have some mastery over their own decisions. However, talking with them frequently about it, setting a tone of expectations that they're going to be responsible, and if you need to, checking in on what's happening is really important as they get into 13 and 14. Model good behavior with the cell phone. You know, I'm going to go back to slide 1 for a moment as I'm digressing. I didn't have this issue when my daughter was 0, 1, or 2. But when you're spending time with them, when you're using affection, when you're using touch, you can't have the cell phone out all the time. Something goes wrong with social media, stay calm. One thing I do want everyone to do, and I do suggest, is talk about permanency and privacy. So at age 13, at age 18, they understand that. At age 13, they may not really understand what the permanency of the internet means. So if they post something and maybe they tell you or you see it and you say, you know, that wasn't really a great idea. That's there forever. They may not really understand what that's there forever means on the internet. So talk about that and talk about privacy. I think you can set some privacy guidelines on the telephone too. And at first I would do that. Okay, let's go to the fun slide, Danielle. The next one's more of a fun slide. So they're going to go off to college. College should be fun. And it doesn't have to be college. It could be living at college. It could be commuting to college. It could be part-time college. It could be a different type of school. It could be getting a job. But those times should be fun. Is that your dog, Danielle? That's funny. That's great.
Yes, the dog just attacked, and so did the toddler, but I got them out. They're gone now.
Okay, it's fine. So college should be fun. Plan ahead. So I talked really more than my wife. I talked a great deal with my daughter about college for a year and a half prior to that time. I talked about realities of it. I talked about different places that we could apply. I talked about geographically where I would feel it was acceptable. I wasn't flying, far away, 5 times a year. I even talked with her realistically financially, what I could afford and what I could not afford. And I never had to really ask her what colleges she was applying to after that. She really made decisions based on the parameters of the things we talked about. So this is a time where you really want to do more listening. And this really is in general, and it becomes more and more as they get older. After college, they really start making more and more of their own decisions. Of course, unless they need money or car insurance, then they certainly will be asking you about those things. But at this time, you really want to guide instead of push. Really focus actively on listening. Say to yourself, I'm going to listen, I'm not going to speak. Let them tell you what they're thinking. Let them talk about things. It's really important they discover their ability to have their opinions sort of be discussed, talked about, and respected. So next time when you're not there, they can make that decision on their own in a positive safe manner. If they go off to their own apartment, if they go off to their own job, if they go off to college, it's important to communicate with them, but don't overdo it. I think the once a week communication is probably a little old fashioned. Now with cell phones and texting, you can probably text every day, but I wouldn't text more than that. Going down to the middle of the slide, prior to going to college, or, this could just apply to prior to their first apartment or prior to getting married. I talked about tough things with my daughter. I talked about the fact that she was going to be homesick at times. I talked about the fact that she's going to have a lonely Friday evening when the other kids go home for the weekend. And although maybe she didn't believe me at that point, I thought it was important to talk about. And when the time came, she was hopefully somewhat more prepared. I do remember 2 times in the 4 years at Montclair State, she called home sick. They weren't in the beginning. I think all the kids went home that weekend. And we stuck to our guns, even though it was hard for me. I remember one weekend, it was the weekend before Easter. I said, no, you need to focus on schoolwork. Mommy and I will come visit you Sunday for an hour, and we'll see you next Friday for Good Friday. So it's okay to say no. Don't focus a lot on those kinds of things. All right, let's talk about safety. So I know this may not be exactly what we're talking about, but a dad and a daughter, of course, you worry about safety. You always worry about safety. And in college, you worry about it more, or when they go off on their own, let's say. I really should have labeled this slide going off on their own. Again, I talked about safety. I brought it up. I didn't harp on it. I would listen as much as I would talk. When they give you a bunch of, yeah, I'll be safe, Dad, I would get specific. So I'd say, do you know where the security office is on campus? Do you have 2 or 3 friends' telephone numbers? Do you know where the safety call boxes are on campus? If she said no, then I would kind of exert my parental part, and I'd say, okay, we're going to go for a walk and we're going to find the call boxes. Do you know what to do if something goes wrong? And I would make her tell her. So with safety, I would be a little less of a listener, a little bit more of a dad. And I in hindsight, I think that was okay. I can't remember complaining too much about that. There was another safety piece I wanted to talk about. Oh, so things like where your car is. Will you be walking alone at night? Okay, so I'm not crazy about that. Let's set up a scenario where we can do that differently. So when you're talking about safety, do more than just ask about safety. Make and say clear, specific things, and maybe even put them in writing or something like that. When my daughter was in high school, and I don't remember if we did this in college, we had a texting code for if she was in trouble, and I don't remember what it was. It was words, but let's just say it was green, yellow, red. And if she was at a party and she texted me red, that would be it. Or sometimes she would text yellow and I would call her. She never texted red, but red meant that I was to come get her right away, no matter what she said on the telephone. So if she called me and acted like everything was fine, but texted me red, that meant I was to go intervene regardless of what she was saying. I don't think that ever happened, but I thought it was a good idea. And, it was something that she could go along with because nobody knew that this was happening. None of her friends realized that this might be happening as she was texting. Okay, so I wish you all the best of luck when your kids go off to their job or their college. It really can be a very fun time. All right, Danielle, next slide. So we're just going to quickly go through the next couple of slides. I added this. I know this was not on the agenda. The agenda was dads connecting with kids. But I felt and I feel that resilience is a big part of this. And I'm not positive that I'm correct, but what I've seen the last 8 or 10 years is 17 to 25-year-olds struggling at times to manage when things don't go well. And sometimes they're significant things, and it's certainly very real. Other times they're things that perhaps they'd be better off trying to work through and remain resilient. So all the themes we talked about all help build resilience. And I know it's written on the screen, but I'm just going to say it anyway. The capacity to recover quickly from difficulties is resilience. So I'm not talking about trauma. I'm talking about, a friend breaks a date and your daughter being able to manage to be able to say, okay, well, there'll be another one. And all those themes we talked about helps give her the ability to say, okay, it's not the end of the world. Some research says that the most significant factor for resilience is a committed relationship with an adult. So I hope that's true. All right, Danielle, we're just going to go quickly through the next two. I just put a little resilience information. Anybody want to pop a question up? That would be great. Anybody want to mention anything about resilience? That would be great too. Don't talk in catastrophic terms. And I'm just going to focus mostly on the first one. And this goes back to, I don't know which number slide it was, but ages 13 to 18, where remain calm. If your daughter says, someone just broke a date with me, oh my, you don't want to say, oh my goodness, how could that happen? You want to say, it's okay. Things happen in life. Text her, you understand. Ask her to make a date some other time. So you really want to model even keel responses. Okay, let your kids make mistakes, help them with their emotions, and all these things model resiliency. Okay, Danielle. And this slide is just something that you folks can read. Resilient children have 7 characteristics, and I'm sure they have more than that. But this slide I pulled from something that I was looking on when I was doing a little bit of research. And they're, of course, very common sense types of things. So those are the end of the slides. I hope everybody thought this was helpful. I do have one more resource slide, Danielle, that people might want to have emailed to them. And as you said, they'll be able to. I checked, I think, almost every one of these recently because I've used a few in the past, and there's a few I really like. The one at the bottom for college was really great. And there was a book in there too about resilient children by Robert Brooks, and that was really great. I didn't read the whole book, but I have read parts of it, and it was really great. Any other chats? Any other thoughts?
I have something on the resilience
That would
thing
be
that
great.
you just
Thanks,
you
Danielle. Jump in.
mentioned. I try not to overreact when things happen. So the other day I opened the cabinet and the entire container of oatmeal fell everywhere. And I just looked at my daughter and she looked at me and she goes, "It's okay, mommy." I said, "Oh, all right. So I'm doing an okay job, but it's okay because she doesn't have to clean it up." But I felt like that was her comforting me was like, all right.
So you've modeled appropriate reactions to her. And in turn, you taught her that, you know what, it stinks that the oatmeal fell, but it would be way worse to overreact in front of your daughter than to worry about cleaning up oatmeal.
Exactly.
Although it probably costs 2 or 3 times more now than it did a few years ago.
Yes.
But
and it's still all over my kitchen because it is just everywhere, but it's all good. Again, she's right. It's okay.
So that was a great example, I think. Well, those are the ends of the slides, everybody. I couldn't appreciate more everyone being here. Danielle, you were wonderful to help co-host. Thank you again to Valley. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I didn't want to get too in depth. I just wanted to go over some of the higher points. I hope everyone kind of takes at least part of it with them all the time.